Hello, and thank you for inviting me to this lecture series, exploring the practices of women artists in the Eastern Europe. I consider this focus to be of immense importance and urgency as we are continually trying to expand historical references about art in this region. The historiographical processes that so far have shaped the narratives about Eastern European art have often had a very narrow lens, creating omissions and leaving out art from Kosovo, and in particular, women artists. Due to that, women remain largely understudied, leaving a critical gap in the understanding of their legacy. The title of my lecture is Redressing Absences, the Legacy of Women Artists in Kosovo's Art Historical Accounts. Since Kosovo doesn't have a written history of art to be able to situate yourself as a researcher, non-traditional sources have proven invaluable in reconstructing the narrative of women artists. Oral histories, state archives, private archives, and exhibition catalogs have been particularly instrumental in creating a more comprehensive account of their contributions. In this lecture, I will try to do at least two things: give an overview of the historical and cultural context of Kosovo, and two, look closely at three artistic positions exemplified through Alije Vokshi, Violeta Xhaferi, and Valbona Zherka. To accompany this lecture, I have also prepared some slides, so I'll just go right into it. After the Second World War, Yugoslavia experienced a significant political, social, economic, and cultural transformations as it shifted from the Kingdom of Yugoslavia to the People's Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. This transition occurred at varying speeds across different parts of the country. In line with socialist revolution, Kosovo developed its own model of cultural production. The rise of abstract art in Yugoslavia marked a significant shift in official cultural policy, representing a departure from Soviet Union socialist realism in 1948 and reflecting the Federation's effort to align with the values of the so-called free world. In 1974, Yugoslav constitution redefined Kosovo's political status as an autonomous province within Yugoslavia, and favorable political conditions contributed to a steady rise in the educational levels of the working class and establishing of new cultural institutions. Many Kosovo artists of the post-war generation pursued education in Yugoslav centers and, after completing their studies, returned to Kosovo, where they helped shape and foster a shared understanding of modernism in visual arts. Both centralized and polycentric Yugoslavia's federations and autonomous regions developed following their own inherent rhythms. Due to many national traditions that were part of the constellations, there is geographical specificity to Yugoslav modernity. As such, it must be understood as its own, as an independent history. The cultures forming part of Yugoslavia were relatively varied, each with different experiences and relations to political centers of power. With the introduction of modernity as a cultural policy, these nation-based and diverse cultures were able to loosely connect to one another through a shared understanding of modernism, fostering a unified art system and a common social framework for the production, reception, and evaluation of art. To pursue education in the former Yugoslav space, or in Kosovo for that matter, Kosovo did not have many institutions to provide such an education in the arts. So in the beginning, it only had the Škola mesme e Artit në Pe, or Peja Art High School, founded in 1949, which trained students in applied arts for university programs across various Yugoslav centers. Later came Shkolla e Lartë Pedagogjike, the High Vocational School of Arts in Pristina, founded in 1962. And then 10 years later, Academy of Fine Arts in Pristina. When viewed from a gender lens, the Kosovo art history after the Second World War largely overlooks women artists. In the years following the war, women also attended the Pea Art High School, founded in 1949, which trained students for applied arts mainly. Later, there were two additional institutions, but this was the most important one for quite some time after the war. However, few women were encouraged to develop their individual artistic practice and pursue art as a profession. Instead, many were steered towards careers in art education or related fields. In order for women to study art in the Yugoslav space, they first had to rethink their role within Kosovo society first. During the socialist era, women and men had equal access to education, but despite these opportunities being available to all, women faced significant cultural barriers to enjoy and access them. Public spaces remained predominantly male, making it challenging for women to establish themselves beyond the private sphere and domestic responsibilities. However, access to art education enabled women to assert themselves as artists, and over time, they began exhibiting their work and gradually carving out a place in the local art scene. The art of this period was predominantly abstract, encompassing aesthetic variations of expressionism, art informel, and other poetic configurations. Through these umbrella styles, a collective vision of modernity within Yugoslav art space was promoted. The rise of modern art brought with it new terminology and interpretative frameworks, positioning abstract art as a universal international visual language, though this was not the case in Kosovo. So these are some of the spaces where art education was taking place. This is the Academy of Fine Arts, and this is one of the images I got from Valbona Zherka, who is also one of the first students to be studying at the bachelor degree in Kosovo. This too is another photograph from a drawing session at the Academy of Fine Arts, which I secured. It's a photograph I secured from Erëmirë Krasniqi private archive. He used to be a professor at the academy. Until 1979, Kosovo had no state-managed galleries or independent exhibition spaces necessary for an art scene to thrive. There was a lack of professional galleries, art institutions, critics, collectors, and even an informed audience at the time. The founding of the Gallery of Art in Pristina, the first institution of its kind, provided a platform to develop strategies to display art. Modeled structurally after Yugoslav institutions, the gallery became a hub that absorbed and showcased stylistic influences from across Yugoslavia's art scenes. Most exhibitions in Kosovo, including the 1979 inaugural exhibition at the Gallery of Art in Pristina, lacked interpretation or contextualization of the artworks. Worth noting, apart from Alije Vokshi, regarded as the first academically trained female painter in Kosovo, no other women were featured in the inaugural exhibition. And as you see, this is the photo from the opening of the Gallery of Arts in Pristina. Pazit Nushi, at the time, was someone equivalent to the Minister of Culture and Education. So on this occasion, he holds the speech. As the main art institution of the visual arts and a gatekeeper of tradition in Kosovo, the Gallery of Arts management reflected very little on the absence of women within their exhibition and public programming. Their programming in the first decade was structured around Yugoslav artistic collaborations, international exhibitions, cultural exchanges, and solo exhibitions by male artists, which contributed to their positioning as old masters. During these formative years of the institution, there was an attempt to create a cultural identity for Kosovo. However, it was based on the experience of male artists solely. Structurally excluded, women did not play a great part in defining what was eventually known as the modern art in Kosovo. Opportunities for exhibiting in the broader Yugoslav art space primarily came through artist associations. Kosovo had three such associations. Shoqata Artistëve Figurativ, the Visual Artists Association, founded in 1962 and led by Muslim Muliqi. Shoqata Artistëve Aplikativ të Kosovës, the Kosovo Applicative Artists Association, established in 1967 and led by Shoqëri Nimani. And Shoqata e Artistëve Figurativ të Prishtinës, the Pristina Visual Artists Association, formed in 1972 and led by Kadrush Rama. Artists associations were essential for gaining entry into the art world. However, a closer examination of the professional biographies of female artists revealed that they had significantly fewer exhibitions listed, indicating they benefited far less from these associations. Efforts to ensure women's representation in Kosovo institutional art scene were undermined by gender biases. The Gallery of Arts in Pristina held an annual exhibition on International Women's Day, March 8, which was locally viewed as a Mother's Day until recently. These exhibitions often featured female artists from various Yugoslav centers, altogether overshadowing the absence of local women in the arts. For example, one such exhibition was Femrat Krijuese. Most female artists exhibiting were not local, and yet the exhibition was meant to showcase Kosovo women's contribution in the arts. Lacking critical discourse to position their artworks, these shows ultimately contributed to the ghettoization of their artistic practices. Though very few in number, artistic positions held by women artists are significant and provide critical insights of the period at hand. The following sections of the lecture will focus on Alije Vokshi, followed by Violeta Xhaferi, and last but not least, Valbona Zherka. In the early 1960s, Alije Vokshi graduated from the Department of Figurative Arts at the High Pedagogical School in Pristina. Her expressionist portraits of women, the elderly, workers, placing an emphasis on their hands, were well received. Encouraged by her professors and later by her father, she went to study in the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade. By gaining admission in 1968, she became the first woman to study art and take up painting as a profession in Kosovo. In 1978, Vokshi spent an academic year in Paris, France. 3 years later, in 1981, she received her master's degree from the Academy of Figurative Arts in Belgrade. In 1974, until her retirement, in 2015, Vokshi taught painting at the Department of Graphic Arts at the University of Pristina. In tandem with her teaching, she developed her art practice and exhibited her work locally and in a wider Yugoslav space. In her early artistic career, Vokshi focused mainly on portraits. They typically featured family members or individuals she met on the street and invited to her studio. She began with this approach, identifying subjects during her studies, such as when she spotted a Roma woman in Belgrade and invited her to the drawing class. Despite the prevailing racism of the time, which still impacts the representation and lives of Roma people in the countries of former Yugoslavia, Vokshi appeared to remain free from such biases. She was interested in what literature defines as the anti-hero, hard-working men and women, the ordinary people. This view influenced her choice of subjects she depicted, and that shaped her artistic practice. In her oral history interview, she described two of these moments where she decides for a portrait sitter, and she states the following. In the center of Belgrade was Hotel Moscow. Near that hotel, I saw a woman of Roma nationality dressed in their traditional costume. They had something special that I liked, and I asked the lady, "Would you like to come and sit for us at the Faculty of Arts?" She accepted, and I took her with me to painting class as a life model. A friend of mine and a colleague said, "You shouldn't have done this. The professor doesn't like anyone interfering in his work, in his syllabus. He only wants us to do still life." But it turned out that it was a good idea to bring a life model, and in the end, when everybody finished their portraits, the professor was pleased with my initiative. The other excerpt from the oral history interview that more or less describe a similar situation is as follows. I would take my life models to the studio. Once I saw an old man from the village, a villager with a horse carriage. It was so interesting to me. I asked him, "Can you come to my studio? I want to do a portrait of you." Yes, he agreed to come with me in the studio. Though he was very tired, he wore a white plies, a traditional white conic hat. His plies was drenched in sweat and was no longer white. I painted his plies with a darker color, not pure white because it wasn't white due to the hard work and sweat. Most of the people liked it, and it was very interesting. At the exhibition opening, a visitor said to me, "This is very interesting. I can see that he is a hard-working man just by looking at his big hands." I'm gonna show you some portraits now. This is one of the first and the one that is part of the National Gallery collection. These are from the same period, portrait of an old man and an old woman, and they are now part of the family estate. However, I will read them together as they are produced during the same period in her early career after graduation and use more or less the same painterly approach. The paint, applied in varying degrees of thickness, blurs the background where the figures are seated, often setting the overall mood. While their clothing incorporates elements of traditional garment, the simplified depiction gives it an informal appearance, stripping them of their traditional significance. The figures themselves appear crude, worn, and restrained, with their aged, drained features. They gaze outward, both at the viewer and beyond the picture frame, exuding a sense of exhaustion. Centrally positioned in the composition, the sitters are almost reduced to basic shapes, comfortably occupying the canvas. In this simplification and flatness of color and form, Vokshi places exaggerated emphasis on the hands, depicted in various poses, crossed or relaxed. Focusing on the condition of her sitter's hands, she subtly shapes their entire portrait around this detail. Hands and their faces are in tune. Rough facial features coupled with the dire conditions of their hands, as is the case with the portrait of the old man. In an interview, Vokshi explores further her interest on the hands. "I want to single out my mother's portrait, where I decided to draw bigger hands, her palm of her hand. I wanted to point out that she was a hard-working woman, a diligent woman, who with her bare hands, out of nothing, created many great and beautiful things for us children." During the socialist period, with the worker at the center of the socialist revolution, this manual labor was highly esteemed, as it was coupled with their agency. Despite collectivist ethos, the individual, with its labor power, it was believed could move society forward. From these portraits, I'm going to move to Aliye's visual diary, which is very particular to her practice, as she does this over a course of 3 decades. Vokshi's drawings are studies of movement, spanning from 1980 to 2008. They are countless, and they take the form of a visual diary. The drawings record her personal time and document her creative process. This also means her going into the studio and not leaving it. In the 1980s, Vokshi preferred to be out in the nature, transcribing its forms. According to her, nature moved in diagonal lines. During the political turmoil of the 1990s, these exercises of diagonally spiraling lines and abstractions out of which at times emerged a face occurred daily in her studio and tell the story of confinement and being one with oneself. Further, in her oral history interview, she describes, as my art practice evolved, I wanted to go outside the walls of my studio and out into the nature and have the art model as the main object of study. Live drawing in nature, I used to do lots of live drawing, and what I liked was drawing art models in movement. The art model in movement intrigued me the most, not just the static aspect of it. The lines in these live drawings, almost all of them move diagonally. In this series, the art model were never real. They were imaginary. They were in my head, and as such, I painted them on canvas. And lastly, I just want to bring attention to this publication and in some way try to highlight the type of discrimination that Alije experienced throughout her practice. In 2016, in the absence of written history of modern art as part of the Oral History Initiative, I started a series of oral history interviews in collaboration with National Gallery of Kosovo. The project aimed to produce a book and an archive capturing the life stories of modernist artists in their own words. However, diversifying the pool of interviewees proved challenging. Out of 6 interviews featured in the book, only one was with a woman, and that was Alije Vokshi. Her career followed a trajectory similar to her male counterparts, studying in Belgrade, doing a specialty in Paris, then teaching at the university. Yet the only work that was consistently shown was the portrait of her mother-in-law, which is part of the National Gallery, in which we see bottom right in this publication. Though the gallery continuously acquired new works for its collection, they only own one by Alije Vokshi, the portrait of an old woman from the 1972. The single portrait was repeatedly used to represent her entire artistic practice from 1971 till 2000, appearing in annual reviews, collection catalogs, and monographs. As a result, giving the public the impression that she hadn't produced any other significant work beyond that piece. This reductive manner of granting her visibility was basically exclusion. Next, I will move to Violeta Xhaferi. Violeta Xhaferi was born and raised in Pristina. She is a costume designer, painter, and interior designer. She graduated from the Department of Costume Design at the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade in 1972. Upon graduation, Xhaferi worked as a costume designer for the Kosovo National Theatre, contributing to more than 100 plays, in addition to designing posters for the theater production. She worked at the state-owned leather factory in Peja, Kosovo, where she not only created clothing design, but also organized fashion shows to showcase the company's fashion line. During Xhaferi's time, women who studied fine arts went for professions in art education or similar, because that ensured a degree of financial independence. By not having art studios to produce art as their male counterparts, and by not enjoying much visibility in the art scene, it made it difficult for women to remain active as independent artists. Initially a trained painter, Xhaferi, by working as a costume designer for the National Theatre that allowed her to support herself and her family financially while remaining engaged in artistic production. In her oral history interview, Violeta Xhaferi reflects on this profound divide between artistic life and family life. I was deeply immersed in my day-to-day life, and therefore, oftentimes she was not able to apply to be part of an exhibition. I had two children, and as a woman, we always carry the burden of knowing how challenging it is to balance being a woman with having a career. These are two opposing worlds. Even the most renowned female artists admit to sacrificing their families to be able to create because the two simply don't align. For me, it was incredibly difficult. I had to run errands, cook, take my children to kindergarten, and pick them up after work. It was an exhausting struggle to manage it all. I am truly grateful to Azem Shkreli for encouraging me to enroll in custom design. Custom design doesn't require much, just a corner of the dining table, a sheet of paper, and a pencil were enough for me to sketch designs for theater plays. Pursuing painting, on the other hand, would have demanded better working conditions, at least a kitchen where you wouldn't be interrupted, or, ideally, a room of your own at your home. To show you some other sketches. So this is from Shakespeare's Ophelia, then studies of 15th century costumes, then Anna Karenina costumes, which are all done using a very painterly approach, and they're all part of the National Gallery of Kosovo's collection. Throughout the 1990s, while exiled in Norway, she developed her artistic practice with focus on painting and had several shows in Oslo, Kristiansand, and other cities of Norway. During this time, she developed a series of 20 works titled Click. The works primarily explore television content and the discontents that come with it. These large-scale paintings are characterized by vibrant colors and intersecting images that juxtapose themes of TV advertisements, sports, erotica, and war. Thus, the paintings touch upon the themes that problematize both Kosovo and Norway, contexts that were familiar and formative to the artists. Creating temporal continuities between historical events that are not sequential and establishing a sense of linear progression where none previously existed is one of the approaches that Xhaferi uses in her work. One notable example of this is the diptych painting titled Rukëtimi. The diptych Rukëtimi by Violeta Xhaferi gives a condensed feeling that demands an outlet. The painting is a collage of scenes that evoke contrasting feelings, creating a sense of a fragmented world supported by dizzying strong colors. The diptych contains graphic scenes of violence and iconic images of refugees fleeing their homes. Incorporated in the same plane are scenes of leisure and relaxation, as well as girls doing sports or coming out of a swimming pool. Painted while in exile in Norway between 1994 and 2003, Xhaferi experienced the war of her native country, Kosovo, through televised images. Situated between advertisements of good life and news reports from the front line, in her works, personal memories and collective experiences come into dialogue, and both compete for attention and seek resolution. Moreover, rather than images of war, she finds TV advertisements unsettling, depictions of everyday normal life packaged for profit in Norway. They feel particularly jarring to her against the backdrop of Kosovo War in 1999. Her work creates a dialogue between these two worlds, a dialogue based on rejection of each other's informational reality charge. The next piece is called 84 Birds, which is a very recent work by Violeta Xhaferi. Through the medium of textile, Xhaferi's 84 birds engage with issues of environmental exploitation, species extinction, contamination, and the violence of machinic life. Although the message she conveys is stark, without undermining the meaning, she softens its delivery through textile design, making it more accessible and digestible. The helicopter, a man-made machine, has an invasive presence and creates a tension in what seems to be a bird-only habitat. Xhaferi creates the feeling of being enveloped in a dense green forest, with here and there translucent moments allowing light to pierce through. By applying color and acid to bleach the textile. Taken together, the painted textile portrays the predatory political landscape and shows the extractivist approach to natural resources. This series of works with textiles by Violeta Xhaferi was just the first of many. In the span of 3 years, she produced 7 more textile pieces. As previously announced, I continue with Valbona Zherka. Born and raised in Pristina in 1955, Zherka graduated from the painting department at the Academy of Fine Arts in Pristina in 1977. She completed her postgraduate studies at the Academy of Figurative Arts in Belgrade, Yugoslavia in 1980. That same year, she became a member of the Association of Figurative Arts of Kosovo. Between 1978 and 1989, Zherka's works were widely exhibited across Kosovo and the broader region, with notable showcases in Pristina, Sarajevo, Zagreb, Maribor, Belgrade, and Ljubljana. She held the distinction of being the only woman from Kosovo featured in the landmark exhibition Grad Kreative të Jugosllavisë, Creative Women of Yugoslavia, presented in Pristina in 1980 and Ljubljana in 1981. Zherka's work exemplifies the evolution of textile art from its traditional associations with feminine craft, domesticity, and functional objects to an autonomous form of artistic expression. Inspired by her grandmother's weaving, traditional tapestry making, and the principles of modern abstraction, Zherka developed a pioneering visual language that redefined modern textile art in Kosovo. In her practice, Zherka upheld the traditional method of weaving, however, not always working with a predetermined design or pattern, but breaking free from the functional constraints of the medium. She transforms tapestry into a platform for her abstract formal language. Deeply rooted in ethnographic and historical research, her tapestries often served as interpretative, responsive to specific events. Despite this connection to traditional craft, Zherka maintained a deliberate distance, evolving her weaving practice in parallel with her painting, thereby forging a distinct and modern artistic identity. In her artist statement for the secondary archive, Zherka states, "The textile works aim to remind and promote the rich art of the Albanian nation, cultivated through centuries by its women. I still find inspiration for my art in stories I have heard during childhood from my grandmother and my father regarding the history of Albanians and the long and difficult road to freedom. This results in my work being dominated by Albanian towers and Albanian women, the resistance and the sacrifice of whom nourished and inspired the efforts of the Albanian nation for freedom throughout the centuries. Because of my nature as a storyteller, I craft my artworks in cycles." So Zherka's practice is structured in cycles. Towers of resistance that reference historical sequences, ato, or they, meaning female plural, addresses the struggles of Albanian women over the years in their relentless pursuit for a better social position. For Zherka, Albanian women serve as a profound source of inspiration, embodying resilience and unwavering dedication. Despite facing immense challenges and barriers, they rise and renew themselves, demonstrating a remarkable spirit of perseverance and strength. And journey, or sometimes migration, is the third cycle which explores the deportation of Albanians in 1999 from Serb police forces. Zherka's tapestry, The Journey, serves as a poignant biographical note that transcends personal experience to reflect on the collective trauma of deportation. It intricately weaves the many routes taken by Kosovo Albanians seeking refuge during the harrowing events of March-June 1999. The dark vertical lines of the tapestry, abstractly portraying the journey, resonates with the somber reality of war and displacement, capturing the struggle of over 1 million people in search of safety amidst cold and chaos. The abstract figuration of the journey invites multiple interpretation, offering readings that extend far beyond immediate associations, embodying both personal and collective memory. Taken together, Zherka's work delves into the modes of visual narrativization, grounded in family memory and historical research. She navigates between personal and collective registers to reclaim agency and assert her place within histories that remain underexplored. Through her weaving, she not only shapes narrative of the past, but also engages in a future-oriented process, that of self-making. This dynamic is evident across all three artists discussed. Through their practices and investigation into society and the self, they have introduced less visible perspectives into the public domain. Their work highlights the continuities and disruptions of memory, challenges official historical narratives, and illuminates the setbacks faced by women in patriarchal settings. My lecture concludes here. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to present these three key artists in Kosovo art history.